Scott Boats here with a book review of the extraordinary book Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up by Abigail Shrier. Full disclosure, bad therapy hits a nerve. It aligns with my deep skepticism toward the bloated mental health industrial complex, a space dominated not by wisdom or courage, but by banal, credentialed conformity. In my experience, therapy today isn't a path for the brave, it's often a retreat for the self-involved, seeking validation rather than transformation. Instead of cultivating strength, it nurtures fragility. Instead of encouraging discernment, it sells dependency, all under the guise of care. The credentials are easy, the science is soft, and the results? More confusion than clarity. I'll say it plainly, I think most of the mental health profession is full of it. Still, a quick personal story might explain the roots of my bias. Back in my undergrad days at U of H, I fancied myself ruler of the student body, a title earned over 4 long years with at least 2 more to go before a diploma was in sight. My father, by contrast, had survived Stalag 7A in Moosburg, Bavaria, as an Army Air Corps POW. After liberation, he learned to weld, not for glory, but to get away from the farm and build a life, and send his 4 children to college. Let's just say my dad wasn't exactly impressed with my campus conquests or my meandering path toward a degree, but I needed to boost my GPA for law school, so I picked up the easiest second major I could find, psychology. Still, when I ran the idea past my undergrad advisor, the legendary political science professor Ross Lentz, I was met with the same arched eyebrow skepticism my father had mastered. "Boats," he said deadpan. "Psychology is just witchcraft without the herbs. Don't catch a curse." But for me, everything turned out fine. I still enjoy Jungian psychology and still think of archetypes in whatever I do. But Joseph Campbell wrote of similar notions in The Hero with a Thousand Faces, without homage to any fake academic discipline, so the skepticism never left me. Let's be honest, psychology isn't science and neither is behavioral science. The fact that this credentialed priesthood of soft thinkers now holds such sway, shaping lives through stereotype, suggestion, and bureaucratic incantation, helps explain the decline of culture and the increasing rate of learned helplessness among all demographics. Mental health is not about care, it's about conformity. As a family law trial lawyer, I spend my days battling psychobabble, from court-appointed counselors parroting jargon, to the self-styled mental health savants masquerading as amicus attorneys, to every lawyer and judge eager to slap a diagnosis on a litigant based on little more than attitude and anecdote. Behavioral science is subjective and exceedingly situational. It's biased at the point of the practitioner, the innocent subject, and the intervening lawyers and others who spoil the waters with hyperbole and suggestion. Behavioral science is not science at all. For example, at one time, homosexuality was labeled a mental illness. Then masculinity was rebranded as toxic. Now the discourse around transgenderism has veered fully into the realm of politics and pop culture. There's no settled science, just the shifting edicts of the mental health priesthood, a modern council of witches, warlocks, and weirdos who revise the DSM like it's scripture for the confused. The DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the so-called DSM-5, revised by the opinions of those who vote on what counts as normal. That's right, mental disorders are determined by a vote. Not through empirical testing, not through objective standards, but by consensus. That's not science, that's politics. Psychology is a daytime talk show masquerading as medicine, with insecure pundits performing for an audience that gave up on thinking long ago. And as the mental health field continues to tilt overwhelmingly female, the outcomes of those votes will also tilt against the normal behaviors of men and dads. So when I heard about Abigail Shrier's Bad Therapy, Why the Kids Aren't Growing Up, I knew I had to read it. Not just as a dad, but as a lawyer, I've watched fathers erased. Not by accident, but by design. Courts default to outdated assumptions. Statutes codify bias, and a cadre of so-called professionals and court appointees, therapists, evaluators, amicus attorneys, wield unchecked influence despite having no real grasp of what parenthood, and certainly fatherhood, means or why it matters in modern culture. They diminish the roles of dads, all while cloaking their ignorance in the language of best interest. Bad therapy doesn't just expose individual malpractice, it unveils a system that, when aimed at families, becomes a weapon against men who dare to show up. Shrier herself is trained as a lawyer, and it shows. She's a smart lawyer. Shrier represents the very best of what it means to think like a lawyer. Abigail Shrier's 2023 book is a takedown of the therapy industrial complex, what she calls the therapy deluge that's drowning American children in diagnoses, medications, and a false gospel of self-absorption. She argues that kids today aren't being raised, they're being managed, diagnosed early, medicated quickly, and sent through a conveyor belt of therapy sessions that pathologize normal development. Instead of resilience, they're coached into fragility. Every strong emotion is labeled a disorder, every struggle becomes a syndrome. Shrier exposes how the mental health system has turned childhood into a clinical project, where kids are no longer taught to cope, but trained to crumble under the weight of normal life. If you think there's meaningful pushback against such malpractice in family law courts, think again. Psycho-labeling is endemic in courts. Events are choreographed, behaviors are exaggerated, and lawyers make mountains out of molehills, all under the guise of mental health speak. Shrier lays bare how therapy culture, especially the institutionalized kind embedded in schools, has eroded resilience and made anxiety not just common but contagious. Emotional fragility is treated like a virtue, while ordinary adolescent struggles are pathologized and fed into an endless cycle of counseling and intervention. She's clear-eyed about the reality that kids do suffer, but she draws a critical line between genuine pain and the new cultural reflex to treat every difficulty as trauma. In Shrier's telling, we're not healing children. We're rehearsing their wounds, then handing them scripts that keep them fragile. That reminds me of too many amicus attorneys I've worked with. The inclination to encourage fragility and rehearse the lines of helplessness. Shrier argues that overdiagnosis and endless emotional excavation don't help. They create dependency. They strip away agency. And worse, they often cut parents, especially fathers, out of the equation entirely. In the name of child-centered care, therapists, school counselors, and court-appointed experts routinely sideline the very people most invested in a child's well-being. Fathers, in particular, are treated as optional, or worse, as obstacles to the therapeutic process. Their authority is questioned, their motives presumed suspect, and their presence too often erased under the guise of protecting the child. A family's short detour through the machinery of family court, with its lawyers, judges, appointees, and opportunists, can leave permanent scars. What might have been a passing crisis becomes a defining collapse, as the system inflames conflict, drains resources, and fractures bonds that could have been healed. So much for anyone's best interests. And when just one of the parents is a tad nutty, she can always find a high-paid dysfunct who will play along. Somehow, weird clients find weird, expensive lawyers. That's how the circus starts in family court. Unfortunately, courts sometimes fall for the circus, because in today's climate, where mental health fears for our kids dominate the conversation, choreographed drama and exaggerated claims are too often mistaken for evidence. Our cultural obsession with the emotional crisis among kids has made catastrophizing a courtroom tactic. One of Shrier's most provocative insights? That when therapy replaces parenting, the child stops growing. The mental health system within schools produces children who grow up without the grounding presence of discipline, identity, and earned confidence. The kids are raised to seek validation from experts instead of stability from parents. They internalize fragility, distrust structure, and arrive in adulthood emotionally over-examined but underprepared. The result is a society flooded with young adults who expect constant accommodation and crumble under pressure. Because the very institutions that promise to support them have, in truth, disarmed them. I know too many people who have been the subject of labeling, including me, but you're always left with this question: so what? Labeling is always, inevitably, profit-driven. If there's no label, then there's no insurance coverage. If there's no label, then there's no state or federal grant money. If there's no label, then there's no empty virtue signaling about saving kids who could have been better and stronger if they'd never been labeled, medicated, or saved at all. Professor Lentz would be sad to see that there are now plenty of pills to go along with the spells. I've seen the power labels carry for good or for harm, and in courtrooms, I've seen how quickly a psychological buzzword can turn a fit father into a ghost. This book hits hard because it's not anti-kid, it's pro-parent, it's pro-agency. It's a reminder that strength isn't toxic, boundaries aren't abuse, and the goal of raising kids isn't comfort, it's growth. The lessons for lawyers and the courts? First, err on staying out of the private lives of the parents before your bench. Accept that you can do much more harm than good, and know that predictable family strife is not an invitation for the appointment of an amicus attorney. Or, second, if you must appoint a professional, appoint someone who produces a written study describing the relative homes, which can be cross-examined. Avoid appointing a free agent amicus attorney, who's free from scrutiny, and who may have a personal relationship with one of the lawyers, or who has personal baggage considerably heavier than that of the parties. For any father navigating a world of diagnoses, for any lawyer battling court-sanctioned pseudoscience, and for anyone who's weary of watching boys be sedated instead of shaped, Bad Therapy is a must-read. It's not just a critique, it's a warning, and maybe even a call to arms. We cannot afford to place blind trust in psychology or the broader mental and behavioral health fields. Their public legitimacy owes more to marketing and profit than to proven science. Beneath the glossy credentials lies a mess of bias, speculation, and cultural trend-chasing, all dressed up as objective truth. For any lawyer facing down a mental health expert, voir dire them, dobert them, draw sharp distinctions, and to the extent the judge gives you room, expose them. They are actors, not experts. Thank you, Abigail Shrier. On behalf of all dads who just want everyone to think it through before anyone writes a prescription or sends our child to a counselor or therapist, thank you. Scott K. Boats fights for dads. I say that critical thinking is good for everyone. Call me at 713-664-4010 or email me at scott@boatslaw.com if I can help you. One dad to another.